Hey, Dave LeCali with Head Games Motorworks, and today we're going to discuss what are the differences between a 2JZ GTE and both cores of the GE head. Check it out. So the first thing you'll notice is there is a lot of core differences just in the number one cam cap. So this is a VVTi head, this is from the IS300, and these are from the older Supra and SC300. You see it has a VVTi, one does not have a VVTi. And that's because the non-VVTi uses a distributor. The distributor would normally go here, but we have this nifty Head Games Motorworks distributor cover. That's right, I'm sorry, these are the only heads we had sitting around for these. They have coils because a coil pack would be attached here, right? And you don't have that for the GE core. Now the core differences in both of these, at least on the top, everything kind of bolts up. You do need the VVTi camshaft if you're using a VVTi, but everything else bolts in. So you could put a shimless bucket or regular bucket, you can do whatever you want. All the valve train fits each other just the same. A little plug for Real Street Performance. They have an excellent video explaining the VVTi if you guys are curious about that. I don't think there's any real reason to make another one. So let's talk exhaust ports first. Both heads, you can see the exhaust ports completely the same. They're round, they're shaped the same, and they're the same runner size. As you can see, all the exhaust ports are pretty straight. They go in the same line. There are not very much differences in between each port. But here is something to pay attention to when you're looking at the two differences, and that is the size of the intake port on the VVTi is smaller than the non-VVTi. There is actually a 40 millimeter difference in between these two. Now, just because the intake port's smaller, it doesn't mean that you're going to really hurt power, at least sub 1200 horsepower, because, well, actually we've made 1400 horsepower with the VVTi, and we've made about the same power or a little bit more with the non-VVTi. So does it hurt power? No, you can always make this one bigger. And you'll see both combustion chambers, they have this lip here, this quench pad. It's a little indented, has like a little quenchy quench, which I actually like it. And the big difference for you guys, obviously almost everybody's going to run fuel injection with coils, you don't want to run a distributor, is the cam sensor. The cam sensor comes in the IS head and it does not come in the older GE head. All right, now we're going to discuss the GTE head. GTE is a completely different animal. This is for the twin turbo cars. This is a JDM twin turbo VVTi head. So you'll see that the intake ports completely different. And actually there is 3 different intake ports here because the GTE has one port goes longer this way, the other port goes longer this way, and then they're almost centered, and it keeps going on. So these mirror these. 3 intake ports, 3 exhaust ports. All right, we're talking about cam sensors. You'll see now this is the GTE non-VVTi, and it has 2 cam sensors. You'll also notice that the boss for the cam sensor on this side is longer. It's much longer than the VVTi. So the VVTi only has 1 cam sensor and the provision for it is shorter, and this is longer. Let's take a look at the combustion chambers. You can see the GTE has just a regular looking combustion chamber. I don't really have to describe it, but the GE has less quench, but it's also a smaller combustion chamber. Now the cool thing, if you guys are going to run boost, is if you have less quench, that means you can run a little bit more timing and less opportunity for detonation. What I think is one of the coolest attributes of these two heads is, now the GTE head, if you look at the placement of the port, when I say placement of the port, we're going to discuss it just from the ground here up to here. Now when you look at the GE head, the intake port's raised 1.5 inches. In head porting, we always want to raise the roof. We always want to make the port taller and make the short term better, and we can make more airspeed out of this. And that is a great attribute to the GE head. Now let's talk exhaust ports. You'll notice the exhaust ports are shaped differently. So the center one is much smaller than the outside two. And a lot of guys want to say, oh, did you flow test my head and make them all the same? Well, they're not the same from the factory. There's actually 3 different exhaust ports. They both mirror each other, all 6. So here you have the port, but the port is shaped on an angle. This one is straight, and then you have one on a whole nother angle. It's almost to a 90 degree. And what I love about the GE head is pretty much the ports are slightly turned, but they're all kind of the same, and they're round. Round really helps airflow. So they're big, they're round, they're the perfect shape for making power. Now I know you guys would have beat me up if I didn't include flow numbers, so here you are. Now you'll notice that the GTE and all of its wisdom doesn't really outflow the GE by that much on the intake side. You're talking to maybe 5, 10 CFM in different ranges, but it's not like walking away from it. On the exhaust side, it's pretty much the same, except for now we're talking about the GE head. As I mentioned, it has a nice round exhaust port, and that port outflows the different ports on the GTE by 5 to 10 CFM as well. What I haven't understood is why so many people go to just rip this head off and go to a GTE head, when I get that the parts might be easier to get as far as an intake manifold and exhaust manifold, but there is some quality parts out there that you can go with the GE head, and you don't have to go to the much more expensive route and have to find one. That's the problem with this head, is the GTE head is very expensive and it's very hard to come by. Whereas the GE head is very plentiful and it's cheap. So if I were to do something on my car, and it's really kind of my favorite because it has a lot of attributes to make it a really badass head. That's it for me today. Hope you enjoyed this. Like, subscribe, comment below. Love to hear from you. Toodles.